All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you all to the regular scheduled city council meeting for the governing body of Spring Hill, Kansas on February 9th. You guys would all please stand with me for the invocation. And I'll ask Mrs. Roth to do that for us today.
Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to meet tonight. We thank you for the people in this room, staff, leaders. We pray that you guide us in our present in our conversations and our decision making this evening, that we can make those decisions and have those conversations the way and serve our community in the way that you served us, Lord. Thank you for the many blessings you've given us and the little bit of precipitation that we received. Amen.
Amen. Please remain standing for the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, if you could please take the roll.
Mrs. Roth,
Here?
Mr. Peel,
Here.
Mr. Young,
Here.
Mrs. North,
Here.
Mr. Van Houten.
Here.
Mayor, we have a quorum present.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to approval of the agenda. We did have a request to add an executive session on there. And for that one, we need, looks like about 10 minutes on that one. So are there any other requested changes to the agenda? If not, I entertain a motion to approve agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0-0. Next, we'll move on to presentations, and we have 3 different presentations for today. First one is a debt analysis done by Greg Vanderberg with Raymond James Public Finance. Barenberg?
I'm gonna give you this and you can just.
No, that's all right.
I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, thank you. Mayor, council members, good evening. Greg Varnberg with Raymond James. Appreciate the chance to be here this evening. I've had the opportunity to work with Lane and Rhonda in prior years and have prepared a similar report and for other cities that I've worked with. They thought this information might be helpful for the council to go through, and so appreciate your time this evening to talk through some information regarding your outstanding debt, how you compare to other cities, financial condition of the city, and some historical information that may be helpful as you think about making decisions that impact the financial condition of the city moving forward. So my background, I've spent about 35 years in Kansas working on bond issues as a financial advisor or an underwriter, and I'm proud to say I've completed about 1,100 bond issues in my career. So I've worked with a lot of cities over that period. So if you'll turn in that report, I know some of you may have a hard copy, but if you'll turn to the report, section 1 and page 4, anytime we start thinking about financial condition of a city or preparing a financing analysis, we look at some of the historical information that impacts what the future might look like. In other words, where has your assessed valuation been, and what has that growth rate been? What's the population, sales tax collections, a lot of that type of information. And I wanted to highlight just a few things here. Your assessed valuation history, obviously very solid growth for the city. I should also mention I work with the Spring Hill School District and have worked with them for about 25 years, so I've followed the growth that's occurring here in the community. It's interesting to note, you've averaged the last 3 years about 10.3% growth rate. You look back over the last 10 years, 8.02%. You look back over that chart showing all of the changes, and the range of growth has been anywhere from a positive 18% to a few years where you had negative growth. And those years where you had negative growth are not unique to Spring Hill. That's coming out of the 08-09 financial crisis. A lot of the cities, counties, and schools that we work with saw pressure on assessed valuation, not really reflecting something negative happening in the community. It's just property values were down as a result of that 08, 09 financial crisis. But the other thing that's interesting too, and I know it's not a surprise to you, is you look at the population growth in the city, and it's interesting, you look back and you've had years or decades where the population has nearly doubled, and you've had very solid growth in each of the last several years. But if you go all the way back to the year 2000, population was 2,727, now at about 8,547 people, about a 3.13 times higher growth just since the year 2000. But as we're also looking at some of that historical information, we're looking at the mill levy history of the city, and not just the city, but some of the other overlapping entities, like the county, the school district, state of Kansas. And then you may also even have some other, like cemetery district or fire district or library district or rec commission. But the one thing I would note as I look at the city's mill levy is it's been relatively stable. You've been pretty close to, 36, 39 mills for pretty much that whole period. And that's, as you can imagine, for a growing city and the needs that are placed on the city, and a lot of times you have to put in infrastructure before the population is actually there. You have to get ahead of some of that growth. It's tough to keep that mill levy stable. So it's actually fairly surprising that you were able to hold it in that range during that period of time. We also look at sales tax collections, and sales tax collections too have been pretty interesting. You look back, go all the way back to the year 2000, your sales tax collection, 687,000, now up to 2.5 million. So a pretty big increase there. And maybe the most surprising aspect of sales tax is how resilient it was during the pandemic and how strong it was. When the pandemic first hit, we expected a lot of cities to see a downturn in sales tax collections. It seemed reasonable to conclude that, and actually have growth during 2020, but then even strong growth in 21 was pretty impressive. So,
Can we ask questions?
yeah, absolutely. I'm happy.
So the sales tax per capita collections, that per individual then, per household?
Sure, per person, yeah, per individual.
So in other words, your population, that number should give you your sales tax collections.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and so we're pulling the sales tax collections per capita from the Kansas Statistical Abstract. And so I don't know that if they may be just pulling just a base level 1% sales tax. So sometimes the data that we pull from that source, if you have a special purpose sales tax, it could make the per capita collections skewed. So what you're really trying to show is, how much is each person generating in terms of just a base level of sales tax.
In our case, about $300.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. So, and happy to answer any other questions, so feel free to stop me. But then if you shift the focus of the discussion and then the presentation to the debt profile of the city, we start looking at, what bonds do you have outstanding, and what are the sources of revenue to repay those bonds? And really what we're looking for here is there anything that jumps out at us that creates a concern? And especially for a growing city. When you look at that chart at the bottom left, that is pretty much ideal. What you want to see is that you're rapidly paying down the existing debt so that you have the ability to layer in new projects. As you pay down principal on outstanding bonds, you finance new projects, you can finance those new projects without a significant mill levy increase or a user increase. The other part of this that I would point out is you have a significant portion of your debt that is paid from special assessments and not the direct mill levy, citywide mill levy of the city. And the special assessments are levied just against the property owners in a benefit district. You may issue bonds to finance infrastructure improvements in a benefit district. And then those property owners agree to be assessed over a 15 or a 20-year period, and that you're using those special assessments to repay that debt, not other revenues of the city, or you're not taxing people outside of that benefit district to repay that debt. And in fact, if you turn a few pages, well, I'll turn to the next page. This gives a little more detail. But you have if you look at that special assessment column there in the middle of the chart on the left, you have about 52% of your debt that is being repaid from special assessments. You also have about 23% of your outstanding bonds that are being paid from utility system revenues, so water system, sewer system, using those revenues rather than property taxes. And then you have a portion of your debt that is about 13% that's being paid from sales tax. So then you get to the balance of the bonds that are outstanding are being paid from a property tax or just other general revenues of the city. So again, we like when we have, like your property tax supported debt is being rapidly paid down. And again, that not only helps you regenerate your capacity to finance new projects, but I'll talk a little bit about the rating agencies and how they view it. It's viewed very favorably from a rating agency and a bond investor perspective. And again, when we look at your debt profile, there's not anything that jumps out to us that's a concern. And we really like the way that your payment schedule is set up. I think that will benefit you in the coming years. So then moving ahead, here's the chart that I think really illustrates well those percentages of this, and where the revenues come and how high of a percentage special assessment revenue is to repaying the bonds. The orange portion of that slide is showing that special assessment debt. And again, you can see that is the vast majority of the city's outstanding bonds, and it's being paid just by those property owners that benefited from those improvements. So then, as you look at that debt profile, it kind of leads into the question of, well, what is the capacity of the city, or what would it look like if you add additional projects? State of Kansas has a debt limit for general obligation bonds for cities, but there's a lot of projects that don't count against that. It's only general obligation bonds. If you have utility revenue bonds, public building commission revenue bonds, lease financing, none of that counts against your general obligation bond debt limit, but also certain projects are excluded. Utility-related improvements are generally excluded from your debt limit. And then there's even a few odd exceptions, like a street project. You can exclude the portion of the street that is in front of a school district. So sometimes even just we have to get into the details of how and where you spend the money on these to find out just what portion of the bonds can be excluded. But this chart on page 23 shows that you have general obligation debt authority of about 27 million currently. And again, that you have even broader capacity to borrow if you're using utility revenue bonds, SRF loans, or public building commission bonds.
But to your point there, would you go back for a second?
Sure.
So you're 27 million in space. Mm-hmm. I think what you're saying there. So you 38 million subtracted from the debt we're carrying, 11.2.
Correct.
What do you mean?
Yeah, so and the formula is to take your assessed valuation times 30%, then you subtract out the bonds that are outstanding, and that gives you your capacity for.
At 10% of, or at, would you say the state sets the limit?
It's a statutory limit, yes. Mm-hmm.
And how do we get that limit as a percentage of something?
It's a percentage of the assessed valuation or the tax base of the city.
So what happens, say the assessed valuations drop dramatically in a short period of time, and we have debt that's close to the limit, what's kind of do we just have to basically stop all new debt until we get underneath that?
Good question. It doesn't, it's not retroactive. I mean, once you issue the bonds, then you have that obligation. You borrow the money, you have the obligation to repay them. But if your assessed valuation goes down and then that dries up your capacity for any new projects, then you don't have the ability under the statutes to issue additional general obligation bonds until either assessed valuation increases or you pay down some of the existing debt. So if you were in that situation, then you might look at, if you can't issue general obligation bonds, then what are the other options? I mentioned Public Building Commission revenue bonds. The Kansas statutes allow cities to create a PBC. It's really an arm of the city, if you will, just for financing purposes. And you can issue Public Building Commission revenue bonds, and there's not a similar debt limitation on PBC bonds. But it's limited in terms of the types of projects you can finance. It's primarily intended for public buildings. But that can be broadly interpreted to, I mean, some utility-related improvements, like if you're financing a plant, that's a public building. So you could finance something like that. But generally, like streets, park improvements, things like that, can't be financed through a PBC. So then the other option is if it's utility-related improvements, the state revolving fund program is a very good financing mechanism. I think you've maybe used that in the past. But if you have a utility-related improvement and you have future projects that can only be financed through general obligation bonds, then you really want to start thinking about, okay, we may need to keep our capacity for general obligations open to finance future projects and finance a public building under a PBC or utility under an SRF financing or even issue utility revenue bonds.
Do things like the roundabout by the high school, would that fall underneath the excluded type of projects? Because, it's right there in front of the high school, or is that something like you were talking about before?
It should, yeah.
Okay.
And you can work with your bond attorney to verify, but again, generally streets financed with general obligation bonds, the portion adjacent or in front of a school district is excluded.
Okay.
So the roundabout is a great example. It was probably more expensive than just paving a street. Mm-hmm. And so if you can exclude that from that calculation, then that gives you that capacity back.
Yeah.
So for the PVC bonds, would like a police department or a wastewater plant, would both of those be included in ones that you could possibly put in a PVC?
You could. Now I would say on the wastewater project, the first,
Utility, right?
the state revolving fund program has a subsidized interest rate, so that becomes a very attractive financing program for a wastewater project. But it could be financed through a PBC if you
So chose.
should.
So you're telling us that our go capacity is basically at about 30% right now,
Yep.
give or take?
Yeah, when you look at this calculation and we work through that math of it, the 30% times the assessed valuation, we subtract out what you have. Today, you could issue an additional 27.1 million of general obligation bonds.
About 70% of our capacity, the 27 million.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly.
What's a healthy percentage to stay under of that cap? Or do we try to stay under 50%, or what's kind of the rule of thumb there?
Sure. Well, and I've got some debt ratios further back in this report, and it shows where your debt to assessed valuation ratio, how that compares to some other cities that have, similar bond ratings. And I would say you're not out of line with any of those cities. And I would also say it's fairly rare that we run into a city that really pushes up against that debt limit. And especially, think about your situation. Your assessed valuation is growing very quickly. Mm-hmm. You're paying down bonds very quickly. You're regenerating a lot of capacity each year.
Yeah.
And, but you may have a large project that, let's say you have a large street project, and I'm just making up numbers, but let's say it's 20 million. We may say, okay, that's going to push us up at a higher debt ratio, but if we repay this back pretty quickly, then it may make sense to take that ratio up higher. But I feel like you always want to leave some capacity and at least know what your options are for the projects that are on your CIP for the next several years. And if you can identify, here's the projects we need to finance, here's the type of financing vehicle we would use, here's how it impacts the debt ratios and our capacity, and really keeping an eye on that for a growing city, for any city, is a wise move. But I think when we get further back in the report and you see how your ratios compare.
Yeah, I was saying, when I read it before, I didn't see like a recommended percentage. I just saw how we ranked against other ones, which seemed to be the fastest growing out of the cities that we're comparable to. So
Sure.
that's why I was like, well, what is the percentage that we try to stay within, recommendation wise?
Yeah, I would say where you are at currently is right in line with a lot of other cities.
Okay.
I think in that comparison, we had the city of Emporia that maybe had a noticeably lower debt to assessed, but I would say Emporia is growing at a different rate. And I've worked with Emporia for quite a few years, and
Growing the wrong way.
and it's just, so you wouldn't expect them to have a higher debt ratio because, they don't have those infrastructure needs that a city like Spring Hill would have.
Cool.
So we talked about debt capacity, but then we also, anytime we look at how much room do you have to issue additional general obligation bonds, that's kind of one part of the equation, but then the other part of that is, well, what is the cost? And we'll look at your mill levy analysis for your outstanding bonds that are just the property tax supported. We're excluding the benefit district, the sales tax, utility supported. And we want to know, what is the mill levy required to repay the outstanding bonds? And that the slide on page 24 shows that. It shows that the projected mill levy is about 1.57 mils, or actually we're taking your existing mill levy that you were using, the 1.57 mils, and we're looking to see, will that be adequate for the coming years? The one thing I would point out on this analysis is that we're using a 5% growth rate, and that's below the pace that the city has been growing, so we may be a little too conservative there. But when we ran this analysis, if you look at that fund balance, the second column from the right, you'll see that the 1.57 isn't quite enough to cover the payments on the property tax supported general obligation bonds. And so if you have solid assessed valuation growth, it could be that in those future years that 1.57 is just fine. But this is something that kind of popped out for us that might be worth paying attention to. It might require a slight increase in the bond and interest fund to cover the outstanding general obligation bonds, unless you see a higher than 5% growth rate. So we then took that a step further and we said, well, what if we take a hypothetical amount and said you had a project, and what we were aiming at is, well, what would, how many bonds could be supported from a 5 mil levy? And so this analysis shows if you set the mill levy at 5 mils to cover the property tax supported general obligation bonds, say for example a street project, and you borrowed 13.5 million, repaid the bonds over a 20-year period, then that 5 mils at a 5% growth rate in your assessed valuation is really what it would take to repay those. So sometimes, it's helpful to know not only your capacity, legal capacity to borrow, but, from a taxpayer perspective, if we do borrow, what would the cost be? And so hopefully this gives you an illustration of an amount, both on the mill levy side and the bond issue side and what it might look like. So the pages behind that mill levy analysis, we're taking just, again, some dollar amounts that may match up with CIP or projects that you're thinking about, and we're showing in chart form, if we add on 16 million of general obligation bonds and we repay that over 10 years, how does that stack on top of your outstanding debt, and what does that take your annual payment to? And so this chart on page 26, 16 million repaid over 10 years, you can see that is taking the total debt service payment from about 2.7 million all the way up to about 4.5 million. Very quick repayment, but you can see how that would fit into your debt profile. And the following pages, pretty much the same thing. We took the same amount, but stretched instead of 10 years, showing over 15 years. Page 28, 16 million over 20 years. And you can see the good news, for example, on this 20-year scenario is that it's not creating a large increase. But the bad news is that kind of tying back to that comment I made when we started this discussion, now you don't have that downward sloping debt profile. And if you stretch repayment out over a longer period of time, that could take away some of your capacity to do a project 5-10 years from now. So you want to be careful of, look at it pretty closely when you're looking at a longer repayment schedule. It may keep the mill levy down today, but it may create some challenges for you of how to finance a project in the future. Same approach, but we switched over to a hypothetical wastewater project, 30 million, and if we layered that in over a 20-year or a 30-year period, what would that look like? So then, switching over to the debt ratio section and really starting with the city's bond rating, you have a very favorable bond rating. You're in the AA category, and I would describe that as above average in Kansas and probably above average nationally. I mean, it's a nice accomplishment when you have a rating in that AA category. And there's a lot of cities in Kansas and nationally that are in the A-rated category, and even some that have ratings below that. The AAA category is very difficult to achieve. There's only a few cities in Kansas and Missouri that get to that AAA level. And so really getting into that AA category is quite an accomplishment, and especially for a city that's seeing the growth that you're seeing. So then when we look at your debt ratios, here we're looking at, and this is what the bond investors will look at, the rating agencies will look at, and it's also important to the city council. Where are you at on your debt to assessed ratio? What is the outstanding debt per capita? And what has the trend been for the city? Is it increasing or decreasing? And then, the next step is, well, how does that compare to some of the peers of the city? So this chart on page 26 is really just showing that 5-year trend. And for example, if you look at your debt per capita in 2017, 3,390, it's gone down to 3,058. Debt to assessed, 2017, you were at 26.9%, now down closer to 20.4%. So, and again, that is a reflection of the rapid repayment. It helps those ratios come down, but also as new people come in, the per capita number goes down, or as new homes are built or businesses are built, then the debt to assessed ratio drops as well. So, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but how does the city of Spring Hill compare to some other cities? And I think the charts on page 27 and 28 lay that out pretty well. It shows some of the key debt ratios that we would look at, and then how you compare to some other cities that have AA category ratings. And in some of these cities may be experiencing population stagnation. They may not have the same growth that the city has, may be larger in population. So it's difficult to find a perfect comparison for Spring Hill, but when the rating agencies are assigning that AA rating, they're looking at a lot of criteria. And when you're selling a bond issue in the bond market, bond investors too are looking at a lot of information. And so that AA rating that you have, the AA minus, gives a pretty quick snapshot to investors of kind of generally where the credit worthiness of the city is. But then as they start to look closer at these ratios, sometimes they will view one AA bond issue a little bit differently than another, and it really comes down to some of these ratios. So on your, where it says gross debt to assessed value, that's the debt to assessed ratio that I'd referenced. You're currently at 20.4%. And I made the comment earlier that there are a lot of cities that are in that low 20% range. So I don't think you're out of line with your peers. Emporia is lower, and there's a couple there that are higher. Bel Air and Winfield currently have higher debt ratios. But I would say you're right in line with a lot of the peers from the debt to assessed ratio. And then maybe a broader range when you look at the debt per capita, but I don't think you're out of line compared to your peers on the debt per capita ratio there as well. Also on that chart, we list the general fund balance and the governmental fund balance, and that ties into the next section, and really the last section I wanted to talk to you about. Fund balance is very important for not only for bond investors and rating agencies. They like to see cities having solid financial condition, but it's also very important in terms of just the overall management of the city. And you don't want to get into a situation where your fund balances have gotten too low, you lose a lot of flexibility, and that can then put you in a position where either you have difficulty in selling bonds to finance a project, or it may put you in a position where that's your only option, and maybe that's not what you want to do. So having solid fund balances is pretty important, not only in regards to your rating and issuing bonds, but just, again, the overall financial management of the city. So if you will, turn to page 30, and this is again, the last section, and I'll stop after this and happy to answer any questions, but we wanted to go back and look over a number of year period. Where has the fund balance been in several of the key funds of the city? And if you'll focus, for example, on the general fund, and you're in a very good position right now, and I guess that's the good news and the important point. But you don't have to go back too many years to see the low point in that general fund balance. I mean, right now you're at 2.1 million. In 2015, 176,000.
That's crazy.
And so one of the, you think about fund balances and you can be tempted to say, well, if we're not using the taxpayer dollars, then we're doing a disservice to the community. But a fund balance can also help you through some challenging times. And those challenging times can be, an economic downturn like the 08-09 financial crisis. It could be a pandemic. I feel fortunate that, the financial condition of cities in Kansas wasn't impacted more negatively during the pandemic than it was. But you could have an event where it does create a challenge for the city financially. We've had communities that have had, a very unexpected and large surprise of an expense due to some extreme cold weather events. And there have been some cities that had, just a couple of years ago when we had the extreme cold weather event, their utilities forced them to make several $million payments. And, you go into a week not expecting to have to make that kind of a payment, and you come out of it knowing that you need to come up with that kind of money. Having a fund balance helps you work through those challenging periods.
It helps you support some of your projects too, or some, and not be forced into a situation where you have to look at the mill levy being your only way of raising the funds you need for a particular CIP project or something. So the fund balance is crucial, and building the fund balance is one of the best ways for us to try and avoid the mill levy conversation.
Well, and it helps us plan for the future too, because we've got to plan 4, 5, 6, 10 years out, and if we don't have any fund balance, we can't plan for that in the future.
I absolutely agree with those comments, and not only does it help you avoid some potential negative events, but it also can be very positive. Let's say you have a project that comes up and you say, we've saved up some cash, instead of borrowing for this one, let's just go ahead and pay cash for this project. And having that flexibility is pretty important. If you have drawn down the fund balances, then you're faced with a project that you really need to do, debt is really your only option at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I think we ended up doing last year, buying some vehicles, cash that we needed. So.
Yeah.
So, your professional opinion, what should that be? Just throw, what should that reserve be? Is there a percent?
Sure. And it's interesting, and I've had this conversation with the rating agencies, because I want to, hear, well, do they just have a set percentage that they just tell everybody, 15, 20% general fund balance of expenditures, or, a number of months that need to be set aside, days cash on hand, enough cash to cover 90 or 180 days of expenses. And their response is maybe a little surprising, but not that surprising. And the example that they shared with me was, well, in some communities, having a fund balance equal to a full year's of expenses may not even be enough. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty extreme. But the example that they shared was, if you are a Gulf Coast community that relies on tourism and you're impacted by a hurricane, it may take you a year plus to rebuild. So that's really a good example, and there's no one percentage fits all. I would say for a growing city, you probably have more things come up than a city that is stable and built out. So that may warrant having more cash to meet some of those unexpected opportunities or projects that may pop up. But I think, we hear the rating agencies talk about kind of like a 15 to 20% general fund balance. But I would say, don't just say, well, there's our number, that's what we need to aim for. I would encourage you to think about, for the city, and what's the right amount of cushion to have. The other thing too, and the reason we included some of these other funds, is that we don't just look at the general fund. It's a good exercise to think about, in an emergency, what funds can you legally turn to use to cover those expenses. Debt service is restricted. It's pretty much there to repay your bonds. Special highway fund, I would imagine those dollars are intended for a special purpose. So you can't just pull those out and pay, other, administrative cost of the city. In utilities, you have flexibility in Kansas to make transfers to general fund. But you also want to be careful not to rely too heavily on that, because then as you have a large utility project to address, there's nothing better than having a sizable amount of cash as you go into a large utility project, and you don't want to pull down a utility fund just to prop up or cover, some of the expenses on the general fund side. But I would say, you look back over this number of years, there's been a few funds that have gotten pretty low, and to the point where it might be of concern to the council. But I would also say where you stand currently is looks to be pretty solid. And it looks like in the last several years has really gone the right direction. And this would be viewed favorably by bond investors and rating agencies. And I think the balances that you have here give you more flexibility than you might have had even just a few years ago. So I know that's a lot of information. All of the charts behind this summary page just show in graph form each of those funds that are shown there. So don't necessarily need to walk through that. But again, appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening and prepare this information for you. I know I probably took up more time than I should have going through this, but I do hope it's helpful. And this is something that it's not only good to look at this type of information now, but I would encourage the city to think about periodically updating this and see if the trend is changing, or if something is happening that might come to your attention by looking at this type of data. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, and the next presentation we have on is 2022 year-end review by the Police Department. And Chief Henson, you have the floor.
Good evening. All right. I'm gonna bring up the slide, or do I just do it myself? I'll do it myself. Perfect. No, I just figured it out. All right. Always like to bring up our core values of respect, which is responsibility, excellence, service and safety, being professional and patient, setting good examples, courteous and compassionate, and being trustworthy and exercising good teamwork. So those are our core values. And then that helps support our mission, which is serving with integrity to enhance the quality of life for our Spring Hill community. Whoa. Just as last year, we have 5 priorities: reduce crime, traffic safety, our employees, making sure that we have good employee development and recognition programs, community outreach and problem solving, technology, and training and equipment are all things that we work toward. This is our current org chart. We have 2 positions that were approved in '23. One is a sergeant and one is an officer. With regard to our priority 1, crime, which we want to maintain or reduce crime by supporting reducing crime objectives and goals, providing high visibility traffic stops, citizen contacts, etc. As you can see, this is a 4-year graph or chart. We've gone up just about every year. 2020 we went down a little bit, and that is obvious. We didn't have as many people out and about. But we went up pretty significantly from 2021 to 2022. With regard to some of our criminal offenses, outside of battery, they've been staying fairly in the same range every year, which tells us that we're maintaining our crime levels. Our reports have continually gone up over the last 4 years, and high lethality, which are domestic violences where there is a higher risk of more injury. And so those have obviously gone up. It's similar to 21, but we did see a spike in 21 there. With regard to traffic safety, we did have 2 fatalities this year compared to 1 last year. Injuries are pretty much the same. Non-injuries did go up. Alcohol-related accidents were the same and have been somewhat consistent over the last 4 years. And DUI enforcement went down about 10 last year in comparison to 21, but very similar to the other 3 years. Traffic stops, they went up significantly in 2022, and as you can see, the violators who were cited were 998. So we do a lot more education than we do citations. We want to make sure that we attract and retain quality employees. We want to be safe and develop them to make good decisions in the field, and help recognize accomplishments. And you can see right now in 2022 we were allocated 16 sworn. We had 2 new hires last year to replace vacancies. Because we lost 2 other professions, a retirement and someone left the business altogether, the profession. Last year we had only 12 applicants. We interviewed 11. So we are outside of 2020, and we had a pretty good applicant pool in 21. 22 was not as great. So we are now starting to feel the effects that all the other agencies across the country have felt with low interest in the profession. We did promote a sergeant, and we hired 1 officer. We recognized 2 for life-saving awards and 9 officers for living the values, which we do at our quarterly meetings. And then each year we have a end-of-year annual dinner, and where we recognize people for Officer of the Year and other top performers in select categories. Community outreach is also very important. It's one of our favorite things that we like to do. But we want to engage that community through outreach and education, and continue to work on our social media platforms. But these are some of the events that we did in 2022. Pops with Cops, Coffee with Cops, National Night Out, Drug Take Back, which we do twice a year, Blue Elves, which was really successful last year. Our Good Deed program, Officer Johnson loves taking pictures with the kids and giving out the Good Deed free ice creams. We also initiated Crime Free Multi-Housing last year, which is a really good program that we work with our multi-housing communities and the management on helping make their community a little safer, whether that is through hardening the target or other natural surveillance, things that they can kind of do with bushes and, you know, trying to get better lighting, and then working with us to help reduce recidivism of complaints that might be with neighbors. National Faith in Blue, Nerf Wars, Fall Festival, Zero Reasons Why, Chamber events. Those are some of the events that we participated in last year. Technology and equipment. We obviously want to give our officers effective equipment and technology to help them do their job. We also want to be one of the best trained departments of our size. You know, last year we averaged about 78 hours per officer, which is nearly twice the amount that we're required. And we've been pretty consistent about that. I mean, obviously in 21 we did almost 100 hours per officer, so we did a lot of training in 2021. We had some diversity training this year. We had autism training this year. We did EVOC, as you can see, that we were racing the helicopter there. Defensive tactics and other types of training that were very well received.
I thought we just acquired a helicopter.
Huh?
Is that part of the equipment?
I don't see the logo
Yeah,
on that chopper.
that's it. That's subliminal.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'll be asking for a helicopter next year. No. Yeah, she did say she was gonna start saying no. We did replace a marked unit with a new F-150, so we do have that one in service. We replaced our handguns last year. We also received a ballistic shield through a grant that was actually submitted by an officer. And we updated our mobile data terminals last year as well.
Is that one shield or shield for all?
One.
What?
Yeah, so it's it's a one that you hold. Loki, he's been busy. We had 52 deployments last year. It is a little bit down from the year before. Narcotic deployments were also slightly down, but he still had 35 of them last year. They average about 27 hours of training per month. We assisted 36 agencies with deployments, and internally within our city, Loki helped out on 16 deployments. Some of our outside deployments were with Olathe, Gardner, the SO, Sheriff, and Miami County, Leawood, Lenexa, Paola, Osawatomie, Mission, and Roland Park. Property and records is also a very important, and animal control calls. We do not have an animal control unit. So our animal control calls are handled by our officers. You can see that with property and records, we didn't submit as many property items, but our total inventory has gone up. We are maintaining a consistent average of how many citizens that we're helping with fingerprints. Records requests went up, and warrants also went up. Those are entered warrants. We served 61 warrants in 2022, which was up from 55 warrants in 21. Animal control calls, they were slightly down, pretty much across the board on all of the areas that we track. So that's pretty good. We have had issues with kenneling. They've been full, so we've had some trouble having a place to take a dog if we do collect one.
What's the CFS stand for?
Calls for where's that? Calls for service.
Gotcha.
So what's in store for 2023? We are going to be implementing new body-worn camera and fleet cameras. That was approved last year with the ARPA funds. And we'll get the body-worn cameras in the spring, and the fleet, which is in the cars, they'll come in the fall. E-ticketing is just about ready to go live. We've been testing it. All of the equipment is in the cars, ready for that. And the courts, we're still getting interface between the courts and our RMS system put together, but that should be done in the spring, hoping March is a good go live date. And then lastly, we are gonna be working on a state accreditation. So what that is, so there's a national accreditation and there's a lot of states out there that have state accreditations, and Kansas has just now started theirs. Only a few agencies have, started the pilot program, so we'll be one of the first ones that'll be kind of taking it on after it's been piloted. But that is a review of our policies and our practices and ensuring that what we have in our policies matches the state standards. And so we'll be going through that process starting in the spring, and could take up to 2 years to complete. And then obviously we want to thank everybody for the support that we have, because we have tremendous amount of support from you and from the citizens and business owners. We really truly enjoy doing our job here in the city, so that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments or anybody? Thank you guys for all you do.
All right, thank you.
Next, we have the 2022 year-end review by the Public Works Department, and Mr. Messer, you have the floor.
Well, thank you. And I haven't done this one before. Do I punch a button here to move screen to screen? Or you do it? I don't care.
I messed up when I hit escape.
I saw you doing something with her and I'm going, oh.
Do you need me to do it?
Show me the arrow, because I don't. Okay, that one. Okay, good. I got it. I want to do a little different tack. I'm going to try to. It's a little different. I'm going to try to present a lot of what we do, because I don't think people know it. So I think mine is slated. There's some numbers in there. There's some calculations and such. But I wanted to show a little bit of where we're at and what we're doing. Public Works, there's our personnel. We have the director and assistant, street and parks. We have 6 vacant positions right now we're hoping to fill. 2 of them in streets and parks. 1.5 in water and 1/2 in wastewater. That's because we're going to share a position. We have a facility manager, and then we have the custodians and the building monitors. The aquatic center staff, we haven't hired yet, but we're looking at up to 4 assistants. I mean, some of these are pie in the sky numbers, because like lifeguards, we hope for 50. Last year at the end of the season, we were in the 20s and we were cutting the hours back because we were burning out lifeguards at a rapid clip. Public Works Administration, that's myself and Taylor, and in the office, Pub Works implementation, which we've been working on, right-of-way permits, invoices, complaints, reports, agendas, payroll, and again, personnel management, working with human resources. This is a report that I was hoping that we could have implemented. We've got 4 months worth of data, and we're pretty pleased with it, but not so much anymore. We're very happy with the program, but we were just notified not long ago that this company had been bought by another company, and I'm not sure where this is all going to go. I know some of the other big users are not happy with it. Some of the changes, I'm going to be working with Spencer in the next couple of weeks and see if we can live with those changes. It's a new platform. I've also been reaching out to Reno County, Leavenworth County, Bourbon County, Lynn County as well, because every place I've talked to has grave concerns about the direction of the new program. For example, if we get out of it and we want our data, we got to pay them $155 an hour to get our data back. And there's stuff like that. So I went from a great product to I'm not sure of. If they can convince me that it's not going to change that much. But here's a couple of reports that you can we can track. That's just 4 months. It can track crack seal, or we can go. These are just pulled out of reports. We can come up with how many hours Sean worked on a plow, how many hours we cleaned ditches. It's everything we wanted. We're just hoping that we can continue with this program. And the company that bought it is G-Works, and we just got our fingers crossed on this one, but we finally got it fully implemented, and that's when we found out they were making changes.
And this is it's a program. Sorry, it's a program that's used by a lot of cities, right?
Yes, a lot of cities and counties, and the owner decided he wanted to retire, took his money and ran, and we're hoping this other company, we went from a 3-page agreement with PubWorks to a 13-page agreement. And like I said, I worked with Lynn County, their county attorney's been working with them, and they're thinking seriously if they don't get some good answers. I mean, it's a study of how you don't take over a company is what they're doing. We still not have been reached, no one has reached out to us from the new company. It's just the people that we've been working with. Our water system, utility systems, here's some of the numbers that, I didn't want to throw a lot of numbers at you, but we purchased 170,000, we sold 145,000.
Million, right?
Pardon?
Million.
Billion, did I say million?
1,000.
Okay.
All right, I'm a little bit of nerves there. We replaced 109 residential meters. 2 long-time employees resigned, and the reason I brought that forward is because a lot of institutional knowledge disappeared, but we've got a good team in place. And I also stuck in here some 2023 challenges. I know it's a 2022 report, but the lead and copper rule is a nightmare. Well, it's not a nightmare. I went to training. It's a full-fledged horror flick. It's not just a single nightmare. It's worse than that. We have to inventory by October of 2024 every service line, and they're not even ours. But we still have to inventory them all the way from our connection into the sink. And this is coming from EPA, and some of this stuff, the rules are changing faster than they can tell us. But it is, the entire country is looking at what were you thinking when you made this rule? At least give us the rules. We're continuing to chase the water loss. We've made some significant progress. According to the state, anything under 20% is acceptable. My standard's a little lower. I'd like to get it to 10%. There are leaking lines out there. There are issues, but we want to correct everything we can.
Do you think a lot of that comes from old water meters that don't read?
A lot of that is old water meters. Some of the problems we corrected was the meters were not entered into the system correctly. What you had was this system, we bought a new system, and they dropped numbers, they dropped digits, or whatever you want to call them. We've got all those narrowed down and corrected, but I'm thinking that the 600 meters we have on order will also make an impact on that.
That's going to bring that number down more.
I think so, because we have, like right now, and it'll be on a later slide, we have about 50 meters every month we have to reread. We have to manually read because they need replaced. But
And the meters have a life cycle on them where at one point they become less and less reliable.
the number I've heard from Neptune, of course, they're selling them, is 7 years. So I would say 7 to 10 years. They need to be gone and new ones in. A water meter favors the customer the older it is.
Right. So
So
like
you're
the
getting
older
killed.
it is, a gallon, it says a gallon went through, but a gallon and a quarter actually
Yes.
went through.
Yes.
So there's a quarter gallon loss that adds into that 14% number.
And we had some meters there that we were not reading correctly, that when we started doing meter inventories, we might have been selling 1,000 gallons when actually 100,000 went through. So we've got those corrected.
We've got a lot of our big ones
Yes,
found and solved.
yes.
But
And for example, the meter in front of this building was out for over 2 years. Well, that's lost water because, so we finally got it fixed. There was some at the school that hadn't been fixed. And a lot of them but we've corrected those, and now we're working on the residential. Now, we did do a lot of inventory of the residential ones, but you can't do anything about that. I mean, all you can do is look at it. But most of them in the system, they were correct. So there was not a lot we could do, except now change them out with the newer. In fact, a lot of the meters are no longer supported by the Well, you can see the guys going around with a little pack on their side and they're reading with a wand. That's a thing of the past. That technology is gonna die here in the next year or so, and those, you're not even gonna be able to get those. So that's why these 600 meters we have on order, not all of them, the 600 that are coming in, about 50 of them are for the industrial users. And those haven't been changed or touched in a long time. So those are the ones that really make a difference. So I think we're gonna make another impact on this.
Sooner you get those in,
Maybe.
faster this is gonna keep dropping.
Maybe get
Yep.
under 10% or less, hopefully.
Yeah, and it's crazy because of the supply chain issues, everybody talks about it. Everybody calls it something different, a meter yoke or a riser or whatever. They're premium right now, if you can find them. We just got some in that we placed an order for last March. But we're starting to see a little bit of movement, so we're pretty happy on that. Water tower inspections, we're gonna do that probably later this month. A backflow inspection program, we sent people to training on that. We've got some more training scheduled. We're supposed to be checking these backflows, and somewhere along the line we stopped doing it, so we're gonna pick that back up. And that'll require a partnership with community development, which it will not be a problem at all. So when they put one in, they let us know about it. And every year we send a letter out and say, we need your new certifications. And right now we're not doing that, but that is because that was a program that somehow fell. But we'll get that one back on track this year. Here's an example, like I said, some of the stuff I just said, the 600 meters. Here's one we're replacing a meter. If you look at that that blue cord in the middle, that's a yoke laying there. 72 new meters in the water systems that we added, 73 customers this year. Utilities, the wastewater, we did KDHE and EPA inspections, ordered the bar screen. We had a waste return valve. Now, part of the problem with this waste return valve that took years to fix, we didn't know what the true problem was because an aerator broke off and stuck in the valve and eventually broke the valve. But it took us 6 months to replace one valve, which took half the plant down because we just could not find a valve. We could not get one. It is finally back online. 107 new customers, 891 tons of sludge. Basically, that's the last of the projects. If you figure take a jar of muddy water and you set it there and it settles out, the bottom is sludge. Well, that's what it is with a wastewater plant. And 891 tons of sludge is a lot of sludge. Daily influent was almost 500,000. The plant is designed for 1.2. Like I said, we ran 6 months with 600,000 capacity, and we did not exceed the limits anytime. So I thought that was a pretty good shout out to those guys down there that keep this thing working. The challenges of 2023, I'm still hoping for that new bar screen in May. We still have the bar screen there, but half of it works and half of it doesn't, which means you have to manually do it. We want to pursue land disposal, which is at 891 tons. Basically, we're paying solid waste to haul that away at 70, 80,000 a year. So if we can find some farmers that want it, but we have to go and get an EPA permit. So we're working on that. We did have a new lift station. It's coming on. Quick Trip was a new lift station, and so was Prairie Ridge. But I think I touched on that a little bit later. The unit on the left is called a belt press. That's how we dewater the sludge. The picture on the right is those guys going. We had to do this by contract down into the sewage to replace that valve, and that was it took a couple of months to find anybody that wanted to do it, and then it took 3 or 4 months for the valve, and then another month for them to put it in.
I volunteered to go down there with them, but they wouldn't let me.
Wanted is a relative term.
Well, this is another picture that shows exactly what they have to do. The one on the left is a lift station pump replacement. There's Quick Trip new lift station, and then The one on the right is cleaning out one of those tanks down there, trying to get that. So we have people down in those tanks. It's probably a foot or more of sludge down in there. They're walking in trying to free up that line. And then the one on the right is the new Prairie Ridge lift station. This is that infamous bar screen, and they delivered it tomorrow. I would smile for a month. I promise. We do have a contractor finally that will on retainer. I mean, we've already signed a contract with them to put it in, and so they're going to take the old one, put it in the yard, and we'll do something with it. All right, streets and parks. Again, we're about 115 lane miles. I think we're more than that, but we're changing so fast, who can keep the number straight? Streets and parks does crack sealing, equipment repair, mowing, snow removal. We clean ditches, pull shoulder limbs. In 2023, our challenge is going to be the crack seal and major crack repair. What we're trying to do is the money that you guys have come forward with the street program, we're trying to extend that money by at least doing as much as we can up front so it'll go further. So we're going to be doing a lot of that as soon as the weather is permitting. Funny thing about crack seal, you can't do it after you get a lot of salt on the road. So if the storms quit, we'll start. I wanted to touch base on some of the big projects. That is the turn lane on Lincoln Street, and that is what's going to be corrected by this project. You can see that guy takes the entire lane. That is the only side we're going to extend out and make the turning easier. We're not worried about coming from the other side, plus there's hydrants and power and everything else there. We were doing about 110 to 200 feet a year in-house, but I felt right off the bat that it was not money well spent because we were so far behind everywhere, and we tie up crews for 3 months. Didn't make any sense. The other picture up there shows the condition that will be corrected in 2023 along with this Lincoln Street project. 183rd is another one that we're working on. In fact, we're going to have a task order here in a little bit to start the design work on these. You can see on the right hand side where the big trucks are just tearing that asphalt. We put it in, they tear it out. We put it in, they tear it out. And I misunderstood what was being said when they said that the cement trucks are going to be 80,000 pounds going down there. I thought they meant, well, there's going to be more trucks, but that's not what they meant. Those big containers, or I can't think of the word, silos there, or for dry cement. They're going to be selling it by the large bags on semis, and the traffic's going to increase dramatically.
You know, Jackie, to interrupt you, but
Sure.
same things happen on Woodland. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, Woodlands.
We have, they cross the railroad tracks, and it's I'm not calling people out, but the concrete, same thing, right?
Yep.
They're turning down Woodland. It's just, Woodland looks like
Woodland's a little bit of a different animal because it's under maintenance bond. Dan and I talked about that. We talk about it once a week, trying to get the company that did it. We're about ready to pull their maintenance bond if they don't get out there and make the repairs. But in all fairness and honesty, some of the contractors the roads should hold up. But it's only a chip seal, and turning into the new subdivisions, turning right there, it's going to be a challenge on Woodland. But we have that. We go out there periodically and try to smooth it back out, but we can't really get in there and do deep repairs base repairs if we're waiting for the warranty, the maintenance bond to take care of it. We don't want to get into a bind there. But that is absolutely a nightmare corner. We've gone out there quite a bit and sometimes take our very, very, very old little grader out there. It should be in a museum. It's a 1965 model. Lone Elm is another one. You can see where we've attempted to patch it. Bottom line, it's beyond our capability. And that's the reason it's part of that project. We just don't have the equipment. You can see on the top picture where the alligator cracking is. We mill 24 inches wide. A contractor will mill 8 feet wide. You can see where we try to patch it, try to get it, Band-Aid it through. We put 50 tons out there of asphalt. considering we only haul about 4 tons at a time, that's a lot of trips trying to just keep it passable. But I'm really looking forward to this project, but that shows what we did last year. And the one on the right is hopefully what it's all gonna look like at the end of the year. And then the other project we're looking at is Harrison. Again, we throw this stuff out there to try to keep it going, but those temporary patches, that is one of the segments that's being targeted with this program, is that section of Harrison there. Some curb damage replacement, but not a lot. Chip seal, this was last year. We did 223rd from Victory to 169th, Maple Ridge subdivision, Sweetwater subdivision, Victory from 223rd to Webster. The city crews again got it there in front of them to try to get a lot of the crack sealing done so the dollars would go further. The parks, some of the progress, Veterans Lake's under contract. We hope it gets started next week. I mean, we're kind of tied up on the jetties and lowering the lake, but hopefully sooner than later. We do mow 42 acres each cycle. Sometimes it's weekly, sometimes it's every 2 weeks. 7 of our parks have benches, sidewalks, trash cans, and structures. 4 lakes or ponds we treat. 14 green spaces, fish assistance program.
We got you a bigger mower too, didn't we?
Yes, and I stopped by today and I said, oh, please tell me it's not June or July. They said at the end of February. We're hoping it's going to be here.
Need it for mowing season.
Yes, because it's going to make a dramatic difference.
Yeah.
We're out here running 50-inch mowers and now we're going to have 172-inch. It's going to be sweet.
That'll do really good to cut your times.
Yes, which will in turn allow these people to help out on other projects. We want to look at the entrance signs this year, and I want to take it to the park board because I really want to get the park board involved. Street Parks assists with daffodil days, fishing derbies, and all that. Park areas, I threw this one in because the area on the left is where the jetties go. The area on the right is where the memorial site is, and the other one's playgrounds. Now we have people certified for safety. We got a couple of people last year, additional certified in checking playground equipment to make sure it's safe. Equipment replacement, there's the truck on the left is one of the ones that was replaced. And believe it or not, that thing's on Purple Wave and it's up to about $3,000. But we took it out of service Monday.
Just keep moving it up.
They said I could use it up till when they came to pick it up, so we're still using it. The other ones are the 2 new ones, and I want to point out the middle picture is the crew is a little different attitude than when I first got here as far as maintenance. First snowstorm, we're out cleaning every piece of equipment and putting neutralizer on there for that salt. These other trucks, you can see the one on the left where the salt is just eating it up. We're not going to allow that to happen to the new equipment. 7 vehicles were purchased from auction sites, which was a good stopgap measure. It helped us. Facilities, that was one from last night, if somebody will recognize the picture. He's sitting up there on the left. You're in that picture. That shows cooking classes, all the stuff. There was an increase of 45%. Community center rentals increased 56. Total rental fees was 112. Aquatic center, that was another one, the slide repair. We had to do the replacement of the pump motor. Challenge of hiring lifeguards, which is going to happen again. We did get a new air conditioning unit for the control room. We just could not keep that thing running. There's too much equipment in there, and we finally, at the end of the season, got it fixed. We got new lounge chairs that we just got in. Challenges for 23 is replacement of the sand filter backwash, or the backwash pump. It's going to be replaced next week. It's finally been rebuilt. Diving boards are on order, and the filtration bed in the next couple of years. Our staff out there is up to 50 light cards, 12 deck attendants, 16 concessions, 4 assistant managers. Lazy River, which is back in operation, which was popular. New diving boards and AC. The Cars project in 2022, everyone knows about the turn lane out there. Oh, wait a minute, everybody knows about the signal light. There was also a turn lane done. Signal light is what I think has been accepted and has been a huge improvement. I went up and checked on the mower today, and the Quick Trip right there had a broadside accident, so this helps our safety a lot. Summary, we're working on the Veterans Lake site, the street program. We're going to be aggressive with our participation. Water upgrades, new lift stations, that's 2, 1 this year, 1 next. And not only with the lift stations, we have generators there. We have SCADA systems. So they are pretty complex. Staff shortages, I think was a problem last year and will continue this year. Like I said, we're 6 short, 7 if you figure one guy's off for 2 months. Software, PubWorks, I'm worried about it. Legacy, so if you see that stuff, piles of dirt reappear at Legacy, which will happen this week. I have a purpose for it. We're putting clay out there, and I know we're going to get comments, but we are securing a supply of clay that we'll know for sure Monday if they're going to give it to us. But we're going to have to tear open that dam and compact that clay in there to stop those leaks. The muskrats are running wild. Pardon? At Blackhawk and Legacy, we have a problem, and we're trying to get some trappers in there to take care of it. We're going to work on identifying new streets. The Cars project, we should be bringing something to you in the next couple of weeks of the engineering firm that would like to design that. The Park Advisory Board, I'm pretty happy to say they're pretty excited about getting involved in stuff. I mean, we're trying to, instead of being, we'll show up and we'll talk for a minute and you go home, we're starting to challenge them. The stuff that's happening at Veterans Lake Memorial, we're taking to them first. Again, lead and copper and standard operating procedures for all operations that we've been lacking, but our goal is to do that for everything this year. And then continue to replace old equipment as we can. Any questions? I think I've gone over my 10 minutes, so I'm sorry.
I think it's good.
No, it's all good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is citizen participation. If we didn't have anybody sign up on the list, but if you would like to speak about something, you can step up and state your name and address. And yeah, is there anyone out there that would like to? If not, we'll go ahead and close citizen participation at this period and move on to the consent agenda. Most everything here on the consent agenda is pretty straightforward. Are there any questions or comments on the consent agenda? If not, I entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second?
Got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0-0. Next, we'll move on to formal council action. First item on the agenda is consider approval of a Parks Advisory Board appointment. This is our very last position of any of our boards that we have open, so that's kind of exciting to fill that last spot. I nominate Alyssa O'Connor to serve in that position. She's actually served in other communities in a similar position, so she has some experience serving on park boards. So she's passionate. She has young kids. And she's really passionate about parks. So yeah, I entertain a motion.
I move to approve Alyssa O'Connor to the Parks Board.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion or questions? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0-0. Next item on the agenda is consider task order for design and construction services for Lamprey Anderson 2023 street improvement program. And Mr. Messer, you have the floor again.
All right. This request is for a task order to Lamprey Nearson to develop 4 projects. And this is, well, you saw all 4 of them. But I want to clarify one point that's a little bit confusing there. The first 3, 183rd and Lincoln and Lone Elm, will be paid for with the bond that was last week. The last one will be paid for with the regular street maintenance program we're developing. But it's wrapped in together in one task order for the design and to get everything laid out. So let's see. Well, I've already touched on the 183rd, the asphalt. You saw where it was down at the highway. We can't keep it in there. We're also talking about up by the entrance where the trucks are turning in and out, turning that into concrete. Trying to work in partnership with Monarch so that we can put in something that the trucks will not just rip back out. The second one is North Lincoln, which is the 2 phases instead of just doing 1, which is the turn lane and on each side of where the city's been working. Lone Elm, that is to take away those spots and to do it right. Part of the problem is the base is not the rock is right up to the surface, and anything we do is pretty much patching. So this will be a contract. And then Harrison is the mill and overlay and spot repairs and some ADA compliance.
And Jackie, I think you should clarify on that one. That's a bid alternate for if we have additional funds available that we would do that project.
Yes.
It wasn't originally in the 2023 plan, but we thought that it's a high priority that if we come in low enough on the bids this year, that's something we would bring back to the council. But we wanted to make sure that we had a bid on that for that amount. So it'll either go in 2023 or 2024, depending on the bids.
Just doing the plans now.
Yep.
Yes. And as you can see from some of the pictures, it's a good candidate. The staff recommends approval of the 2023 street improvement program and the approval of the Lamprey Nearson task order for $141,400. The alternative is to approve the task orders, design and construction for 2023 street improvement program as presented can proceed. Deny the task order which result in no 2023 improvement program, or remand the issue back for modification. The funding source will be the capital infrastructure or the bond for the first 3, and then the other one will be out of the maintenance staff or street maintenance program. There's 2 different titles. One's the bond and one's the money, the $2 million that we're working with. With that, I'd entertain any questions, or did I cover everything?
I have a question on the first street listed, the 183rd Street. There was conversation of some partnership there.
Yes.
Do we have any confirmation, or is that lined
Dan's
out?
been in conversations with them. It's just a matter of working with them of how much they're gonna.
Sure.
But there is some,
Okay.
and we're asking for more, basically.
Well, it's just
Worth a shot.
Yeah, I
Well, actually, if you go back to the planning and zoning approval, they flat out said, and we will fix any roads we tear up. So we expect a substantial partnership on this.
okay. Well, and it'll be mutually beneficial to both
Yes.
them and the city. So hopefully, it's enticing for both parties.
We figure that bare minimum 2 tractor trailer links have to be hardened.
And we're
them
gonna
to
put,
not
tear that
push
out.
our asphalt out. I'd even like to go further than that, but we're gonna see where the funding goes.
We're gonna
and-
tear that out and put concrete in instead of asphalt. Is that the plan?
Well, that's what the task order's gonna do, but the plan is either if we can get a strong partnership, do a lot more, or 300 feet, and then in front of their turns and asphalt in between. Right now, it's all on the table and being discussed
Okay.
with them, because Dan and his group's already really started on this and started the preliminary conversations, because we're late in the season.
I did have one more question on Lone Elm. We're talking about is there anything that's being done with the ditch as well, or is that just as?
Yes, that'll be part of it.
Okay. Is that as funds are available? Okay.
Yeah, that's, you can boil street maintenance down into 4 words, really, keep the water out. Once the water gets in the base, your road's toast. So if we don't do anything with the ditches, we're inviting the same critical issues. So there will be some ditch, development as we go. It's just gonna have to be, whether we do it, whether contract does it, but they need to be cleaned out and established.
And I know the Lincoln Street one, that's one that's been needed done for many, many years, and some of the businesses down there personally reached out to me, you know, kind of really begging us to do something about it, so I'm glad to see that that's finally getting going.
One of the managers told me, he said that some of the people making deliveries are charging them a surcharge because the road is so bad and the damage to their trucks. Yeah, I think it's a leap, but they're doing it.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, I'm not doubting what the guy said, but I think the other businesses, it's kind of a leap to say
Yeah,
that section did it.
the one that I talked to, one of the main ones I talked to, he said actually the biggest issue it was the employees' vehicles.
Yes.
He said employees are tearing up their vehicles by driving over all these potholes and really bad roads, and so that's really what he was more worried about. Not that he's not worried about the trucks, but he was more worried about his own employees, because that's, you know, his job to take care of them. And so that's the biggest ask he wanted, was get these fixed so his employees don't have so much extra maintenance on their vehicles driving over all these potholes.
Which, to be fair, I mean, that's a fantastic corporate citizen that we want in our community. Somebody
Absolutely.
Who's looking out for their employees and staff.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's-
Any other questions or comments on that one? If not, I entertain a motion.
I recommend approval of the 2023 street improvement program. I make a motion for approval of the 2023 street improvement program with minor adjustments as necessary based on actual contract bids, provided that the program is approved for approval of Lamper Nearson task order and provide design and construction services.
Do we need the amount on there?
If you'd like to throw that in.
$141,000.
In the amount of $141,400.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion or questions? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0-0. Next item on the agenda is consider approval of resolution number 2023-R-06, adopting the Employee Purchasing Card Handbook Revised Edition 2023 for the city of Spring Hill, Kansas. Mrs. Dunn, you have the floor.
Great, thank you. Good evening. We have 3 policies coming up. I think you're going to see, we've been adding some policies over the last few months, and you're going to see us continue to update policies. Some things are accepted procedures, but not really been in a policy, and others are policies we use all the time. We're just updating to a 2023 version. On the purchasing card handbook, this is for the city-issued credit cards that the employees use, and this is an update to the current version and for 2023. We're trying to keep it consistent with the upcoming 2023 purchasing policy and the 2023 travel policy. The policy is reviewed with new employees in the orientation, and as well as when it gets documented with HR, and then the policy's gone over with them when they actually receive the card from finance. We're also going to be increasing the policy or the card limits for everyone because we want to use the card more and write fewer checks. No more $5 checks to Napa, things like that. And so this policy updates for those changes. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about the purchasing card policy handbook.
That seems pretty straightforward.
It is.
Similar to what I've had work.
Yeah.
Yep, I don't think I have any questions either.
Nope.
If there are no questions or comments on that one, I entertain a motion to approve the resolution.
I move to approve resolution 2023-R-06, adopting the employee purchasing card handbook revised edition 2023 of the city of Spring Hill, Kansas.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion or questions or comments? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0-0. Next item on the agenda is consider approval of resolution number 2023-R-07, adopting duty equipment, clothing, and boot policy, first edition 2023 of the city of Spring Hill, Kansas. And Mrs. Dunn, you still have the floor.
Thank you. This is basically a uniform policy. The important thing here is that the police department has their own uniform policy that's been in place for quite some time, and we're not changing that policy. We're just referring to it here as a part of the overall uniform policy. Each department has been buying uniforms and things in different ways, and not that any of that's wrong, there's just never been a formal policy in place. And so this formalizes what we're doing and makes it easier for employees to understand how things work or get reimbursed. A couple of important things here. It is different by department for reasons. For example, boots wear out faster in wastewater and water and streets for the work they do versus in community development and code enforcement. And so this allows the departments to do what they need to do. This policy also references CENTOS, since we just went to the CENTOS uniform program, how we will handle it through CENTOS. And then if we don't have CENTOS anymore, how the policy would work for providing uniforms to the employees and their laundering and things like that. It also talks about boots. One of the things that we have to do is because safety shoes can be worn home, they are taxable income to the employee. It's a taxable fringe benefit. And so this also puts in place the policy so the employee understands that they'll be taxed. They'll see it on their W-2. It'll be grossed up to cover the value of the tax, and so that we don't want them out of pocket for equipment we provide to them that they just happen to be able to wear personally if they want to. So things like that are part of the uniform policy, and I am happy to say it'll be our first edition, and we'll have a consistent written policy in place for everyone to follow. Can I answer any questions about duty equipment, clothing, and boot policy?
Again, looked pretty good to me.
Yep.
Good.
That was pretty straightforward. Any questions or comments? If not, I entertain a motion.
I move to approve resolution number 2023-R-07, adopting the duty equipment, clothing, and boot policy, first edition 2023, of the city of Spring Hill, Kansas.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion or comments? Not all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0-0. Next item on the agenda is consider approval of resolution number 2023-R-08, adopting the travel policy, and this is also the first edition of 2023. City of Spring Hill, Kansas, and Mrs. Dunn, you have another one.
This is another one where we have standard procedures or accepted ways that we do things, and we're formalizing it into a policy. A couple of high points for this: instead of the employee putting in maybe using their own cash or card for what's called meals and incidentals, so food when they're traveling, or tips and things like taxi cabs or something, Ubers, I'm old school, Ubers, that we'll be able to do a couple of things. One, we'll have, I'll call them generic purchasing cards that we would be able to check out to an employee so they're not tying up their money for city expenses and then waiting for reimbursement. But more importantly, we'll also give them a per diem. And so we don't have to struggle with getting a restaurant to take sales tax off the bill or getting the employee to correct it when they forget and things like that. They'll have a per diem. It's up to them. If they want to have a steak every day and overspend their budget, that's their problem. If they want to save money, Yep, you do whatever you want. It's on your own on that one. So, a couple of good changes, and again, these are formalizing what we do. We also added a travel approval form, which triggers the payment of the per diem. It also is a formal approval that the department manager, department director signs off and says yes to this training and that you're going to travel. And it's things that we talk about. How much is the travel going to cost? How much is your hotel? What's the fee? But it formalizes it into a document. It tells us it's time to pay a per diem, things like that. So it's just formalizing things and making it consistent between departments. So I'll be happy to answer questions about the new travel policy.
The per diem would be really helpful if we hadn't been doing that before. It'd be way better than reimbursements.
Yes.
Absolutely.
We don't chase receipts. We're not after employees who don't get receipts. They're not keeping track of those things. We also follow the Government Services Administration, their policy. In general, in Kansas, the rate is pretty similar around Kansas. But if you're in Wichita, it might be more than if you went to Salina. But it's dollars difference. And if you go to Chicago for a training or something, obviously it'd be different per diem there. So we follow the federal government guidelines.
I think it'd be a lot less headache for the employee and for management as well.
Exactly.
How much travel would you say we have overall, like, as a staff for the year?
I should have looked that up. Not very much. Something simple. It is generally training and conferences where Amy's sitting here, so I'll burn her out. She's headed to a conference in April. So she's filling out her form and getting all of her approvals, and we'll pay the per diem.
Good job, Amy.
Captain Khan is in training for several weeks. We paid a per diem to him in advance, things like that. So make it simple. It's definitely a cleanup, and it's great to have it in a policy. So a department director can say, here's what we do. It's not this guy's easygoing and he pays for everything, and this gal's hard-nosed and she won't pay for anything. We don't do that. It's much more consistent.
Yeah, that's good.
I like it. Any other questions, comments on that one? If not, I entertain a motion.
I move to approve resolution number 2023-R-08, adopting the travel policy first edition 2023, the city of Spring Hill, Kansas.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Not all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0-0.
I'll just finish up on policy that you're going to see more policies coming. The purchasing policy, the big 33-page document, I'm hoping, I plan for it to be on the agenda next time. I'll challenge Spencer. He can challenge me back, but we want to have it on there. I hope to get it to you in advance like we do so that you have plenty of time to read 33 pages. They also, going back to Greg's presentation on debt, you're going to see a debt policy. You're going to see a reserve fund balance policy. You're going to see investment policy, things that may exist around here, but they probably haven't been updated. And my goal is to update them, which will help influence our bond rating, that we have current usable implemented policies in place, and we'll be doing a lot of those administrative work. So policy is my middle name.
Great job. Thank you. With that, that's all we have on formal council action, and we'll move on to announcements and reports. I don't really have a lot of announcements. I did one thing I was excited about. I got high-speed internet at my office today. So that was a big deal. I actually did a speed test before I changed internet over, and I had 4.6 upload speed, and download speed was 0.37 before I had speed, and then it went up, of course, over 100 after I changed. So that was exciting. Moving in the right direction here in Spring Hill with high-speed internet. So if you're not on the list, they have openings for people getting signed up, and now we have a couple different companies competing for all of our business. So that was a big priority of mine to try to get high-speed internet here, and it's finally happening, and so that's kind of exciting. Other than that, go Chiefs. Mrs. Roth.
I just wanted to comment on some of the things that were said tonight. First of all, I'm also a policy, process, and procedure kind of gal, so I love that. It just eliminates, well, what do we do in that? Well, let's look. And it's right there, so it's easy.
What's the book say?
I appreciate that. Thank you for all the work that you and your team has done to put those in place. Jackie, I wish upon you a bar screen And then, Chief, I really liked what you said earlier, education, not citations. I think that's really cool, that's what we're pushing, not citations, just educating, and I think that's a good testament to what your department and you guys are doing, so thank you for that. Other than that, that's all.
Mr. Van Houten?
Sure, I'll keep it brief. Just to people who are listening, to the debt profile and financial overview, and I think we're trying to do this kind of in conjunction with the comp plan, and trying to see what direction we want the city to go. So, people who are interested in city stuff, now's your time to plug in, right? So you can do that on the comp plan. We're trying to be able to demonstrate where we're spending money in the future appropriately. So a lot of that has to do with the comp plan and where we see development growth being in Spring Hill. So I just want to advocate for anyone who has any ideas for Spring Hill to plug in, be part of it, part of our growth. It's a good time to be a Spring Hillian.
Mr. Peel?
I got Clearwave at my house this week. Also on Tuesday, I got a gig down and almost a gig up. So that's a really massive improvement for what I had before. And they installed the Wi-Fi 6, which I've spent a lot of time this week learning about, is a whole new system of Wi-Fi, and you can delegate different things, and you can control your kids' devices and how much Wi-Fi they get. So it is really cool. So they're using the latest technology, and their fiber is really, really good. So that was cool. Also, Mayor Berkey and I had a chance to meet with Chairman Kelly this week from the Johnson County Board of County Commissioners. He's newly elected into that position. Obviously, Johnson County is half of our community, or more than half. And we just got a chance to sit with him for about an hour and talk about the different issues that are happening in Southern Johnson County, things that are happening on the full county scale that they're talking about and working on, and also sharing some of the growing pains and difficulties that we're having, and finding those ways that we can help each other out. So we talked about the CARS program a lot, and how important it is to us, and how we really need that to keep flourishing and doing the projects that we need to. So it was nice to start building that relationship and getting a good working role going with them.
Yep. Mr. Young?
I finally got internet too, which was kind of cool. Our side of town, which is good. I had two questions. One for Chief. When we send the dog out to other cities, is there a fee assessed for that?
No.
There isn't? Okay. And then I was just glad to hear that we're working on the rating. I know that's something we've talked about, and we haven't really talked about it lately. So glad to see that we're looking to see how we can up that, because I know that helps with rates and all that stuff when we're doing our bonding. So that's it. I don't have anything.
Mrs. North?
I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate all that the staff and the department heads do, and Chief Henson and all of our police officers to keep our city running smoothly and to keep us safe. So thank you.
Absolutely. Mr. Massey?
Along with the debt analysis, staff, Rhonda and I have been working with getting an RFP out. She's done a great job on that. We're hoping to bring back to the governing body here in the next, is it the end of March or beginning of
No, I
March?
think it's the beginning.
Beginning of March, we'll bring back an RFP and with recommendation of what company to go with. We're going to try to put together a strategic financial plan. It'll probably take about 3 to 4 months to complete that. It'll be a fluid document or a fluid tool that we can utilize, but that's really going to help out with what the governing body has said about growth and the comprehensive plan. Hopefully we'll be able to give the governing body and the citizens some good information on what the debt looks like and what, as growth happens, what revenues are coming in, and give us a solid ability to plan for the future. So we're real excited about that, and I think that's going to be a great tool for the governing body to help over the next, I hate to say it, 20, 30 years, but These are visions, and the comprehensive plan is extremely important at this point to start looking not at today or tomorrow, but, 10 to 20 to 30 years out on what the citizens want this community to be. So we look forward to that.
Mr. Lowe?
No major comment. I just wanted to real quickly say I'll probably be out here the next few meetings for Chuck. So in the meantime, I'm looking forward to seeing you all on a more regular basis. Hopefully you are looking forward to seeing me too. I don't know. I may never give Pat his seat back, but if you need anything, feel free to reach out. Thanks.
Thank you. Chief Henson?
We do have postings for police officer and a newly titled public service officer position. That was the administrative assistant, formerly known as administrative assistant. So that is out if you know anyone who's interested. We also have our newest sergeant who has joined us, and that's in the back of the room. That's Sergeant Reinhold, and we'll have a ceremony with him sometime in the future.
Awesome. Welcome. Thanks for serving. Madam Clerk?
No report.
Mrs. Dunn? Do you have anything more to add?
Yes, always. One, I wanted to say that we have a new employee in the finance department. Her name is Dana Carruthers, and she started on Monday filling our vacant accounts payable position. Pretty excited about that. She comes with some experience with our Tyler system as well as accounts payable, and I think we've been making some great improvements over the last few weeks. Just by changing people and putting it in someone new's hand, I hope makes more improvements to what we're doing. I just wanted to make a couple of comments on the debt analysis that was presented. And one, I want to thank all of you who, have engaged and asked questions. I can tell you're interested in hearing that. I know that was the deep end of the pool when you talk about debt analysis, but it's really important because we're building on things here, and this is really our foundation. And the next step is, the policies that I talked about. Let's get the policy in place. What do we want our reserves to be? What are we going to say about debt? How far into the debt ceiling do we want to be? And set those policies in place so we have a roadmap, build on that foundation. And then the RFP for a long-term financial plan will be the next step after that. So we are building a roadmap. I hope helps build your confidence in the decisions that you're making, and that you've put us on the right track, and we have a vision not only for what streets are going to look like, but what the finances of the city are going to look like as well. And I also wanted you to know that Greg Varenberg from Raymond James, they did that as a service to us, and we did not pay for that analysis, which I think was pretty incredible. We don't often get something for free, and I appreciate that, and I think they did a fabulous job.
Yeah, they did a great job. Mrs. Jones?
The only update I have for you guys is in December when we did the salary resolution, I mentioned that we'd be wanting to do a comprehensive compensation and classification study so that we can get to the point where we're seeing, okay, are our ranges where they need to be in positions, and use that as a foundation as we look to what we need to do internally for equity, as well as continue for recruiting and all those different aspects with benefits. So I am saying that in the next meeting or so, hopefully, I'll be bringing the results of an RFP to you and presenting some recommendations on a firm to go with on that. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Messer?
I really want to say no report, but I do have a couple of things. Veterans Lake, I know everybody's waiting for some dirt to get moved. I hope next week. It's making a liar out of me because I keep saying we're going to start, but we're tweaking the jetty plans a little bit. The other thing on the fiber, Clearwave is done. They will be back to clean up yards and stuff like that when the weather and it dries out. Comcast is in town. We're going to try to get a map out at some point in time of where they're going to be ahead of time, but basically they're going to run down 199th and 191st first, and that's where they're going to be going probably in the next week. They hope to have the first customers online within a month. The other thing is I have been working, it's been an ordeal, but I have good contacts with these cable companies. So if somebody calls up and says, they damaged my driveway, I finally have a list I've worked my way through all the names of this company, bought this company, this bought. I have contacts now with all the major cable companies, so not that I want a bunch of complaints, but if somebody has a complaint, I now, just give me a call, I have a place to direct them that, these people are promising to be very responsive. Comcast is gonna put a trailer out, they're gonna be on site, so they're gonna be real easy to catch, so, anyway, that's all I had.
And we did with Comcast, we did have a big meeting with them, within the last week to really kind of go over some of our growing, what I would call growing pains and stuff. And they are being very responsive on that. And so they have promised to make it good for the citizens and everyone else. So yeah, if anybody has any issues with either company, Clearwave or Comcast, please don't hesitate to contact us and we'll point you in the right direction. There will be some growing pains as something like this, some major work going into laying fiber everywhere. There will be some growing pains, but we hope they're minimal. And I know I, for one, am excited to have fiber internet, and I think everybody else will be as well. I just want to clarify one thing you said, Jackie, when you said Clearwave is done. They're not done like doing installs and all that other stuff.
No,
You can still sign up and get service. I think he meant lay in the main fiber network.
And
Heavy lifting.
The other two companies I do have contacts for is Altus and Brightspeed. If we need, somebody has a complaint that the yard was abused and needs to be fixed, I can direct them to the people now. I've finally got to the level of people that will respond.
Right.
Is Comcast going to be TV and internet?
Yes.
Okay.
Comcast has and a lot more than that. They have
Yeah, I was gonna say they have.
they have a full
Right,
spectrum.
okay.
They have phone service. I mean, they have everything. Yeah. So exciting to have both of those two companies competing against each other for our business. So I like it. Mr. Massey, did you have something to add on that? I saw you kind of raising your hand a little bit.
I was just gonna say that Comcast, they're planning to try to do door hangers about a week in advance of being in the neighborhood. And I believe on the door hanger, they will have a contact number in case there's any issues, so.
And we're also going to try to get a map out ahead of time. We'll have live and a site where you can go visit and have live views of a mapping of where they'll be going in the next week, the next month, whatever ahead of time. So hopefully weeks in advance when they're going to be, approximately when they're going to be in your neighborhood prior to them putting the door hangers on.
This might also just be, I'm assuming for businesses, but we actually received a phone call at work to say, hey, by the way, we're going to be digging in your yard next week. And that might just be, the main trunk there, but it was nice to have advance notification from them that they're going to be out there. But again, I'm assuming that's not residents, that's business.
Yeah.
Still nice to know for businesses. So.
So we will try to continue improve on that because we know there were a few issues with some lines being cut and stuff like that. Not saying that that's not going to still happen. But obviously, we hope to improve that and make it minimal. So. Anything else, Mr. Messer? If not, we'll move on to executive session.
Rhonda's got.
What?
Sorry, I had one more, I wanted
Go ahead.
to add. We approved a couple of things last time, the Centos agreement for uniforms and the enterprise fleet management. And I want you to know that they have been out and on Centos and done all the measurements, and it's about a 4-week turnaround for the new uniforms to be in place, but that's moving forward. Enterprise has jumped right in, and they've identified 12 of the vehicles already for us. Some of them are on the ground and will be headed this way. We have some documents we're working out, signing and things like that. And based on the cars we're selling and the cars we're getting, the net cost of those 12 cars for 12 months would be about $5,000. So just wanted you to know that. I wasn't going to believe it. I did. I did the math right away to say, yeah, it works. So anyway, just wanted to give you an update. Those things are moving forward.
I think right there, that's just showing us that we made the right decision in 12 vehicles. I mean, that's great. Anybody else? Next, we'll move on to executive session. I believe we just have one and we need 10 minutes in it. So if somebody wants to make that motion.
Let's see here. I move the city council recess into executive session for 10 minutes to receive advice of counsel pursuant to the attorney-client privilege exception of KSA 75-4319 Bravo 2 of the Kansas Open Meeting Act. The open meeting will resume in city council chambers at 9:05 PM. No formal action is anticipated following the session. Persons to be in attendance are the following: Mr. Lane Massey, City Administrator, Mr. Spencer Lowe, City Attorney.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We'll see you guys shortly.
Start with a spec of, they start with a spec and they move their way up.
Oh, okay, yeah.
No, we tried that, and he had like a bunch of.
Came back, she gets on.
And it's not like.
I'm sorry.
It just sucks, you know?
Allergies.
Yeah.
Welcome back, everybody. Let the record reflect that the governing body reconvened in open meeting at 9:05 PM. No votes were taken or decisions made during the executive session. The discussion was limited to the subject stated. And with that, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Got a motion to second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0-0. Have a good night, guys.